My Airbnb portfolio is worth roughly $14 million. Last month alone, it generated over $178,000 without me owning a single property. And the funny thing is, the whole thing started from one property that I funded by maxing out a personal credit card because I didn't know any better. So today I'm going to break down every number behind this portfolio, the one rule I use to know whether a deal will make or lose money before I sign anything, and how one property snowballed into 17 in just over 3 years, and why not a single one of these properties is an Airbnb anymore. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it takes to build a portfolio like this so you can do the same thing. Now, if you break it down, each one of these 17 properties brings in about $10,500 a month in revenue. My best property does about $16,000 a month, while my lowest does about $8,000 a month. And there isn't a single underperformer in the portfolio because every property went through the exact same filter before I ever signed the lease. But I'll get to that filter in just a minute because it's the single most important thing I've learned in this business. The difference between 16,000 and 8,000 comes down to the market and the property type, because a 3-bedroom house with a pool in a market that gets event traffic is completely different from a business than a 2-bedroom in a quiet city with nothing going on. Both are generating real income every single month, but the ceiling is different. And then there's the upside that the monthly averages don't even capture. During the Super Bowl, I was charging over $2,000 a night on one property. Between that and the Waste Management Open, 1 weekend alone brought in close to $100,000 across the entire portfolio. One weekend like that covers an entire slow month and then some. And on the operations side, every property runs on the same systems: automated pricing that adjusts in real time based on demand, automated guest communication, and cleaning crews that dispatch the second a checkout happens. And that's what lets me run 17 properties without being buried in the day-to-day operations. And across the life of this portfolio, that's over 21,000 booked nights and more than 4,200 stays. Now, the reason I can sit here with 17 properties and not a single one I'd take back is because one rule that's kept me out of every bad deal I've ever looked at. Before I sign the lease, the property goes through the same filter. My monthly rent needs to be covered in roughly 10 days of bookings based on the average nightly rate in that market. So if a property rents for $3,000 a month and comparable listings in the area on Airbnb are booking at $400 a night, that rent is covered in less than 8 days, which means the remaining 20 plus days of the month are where the real income lives. The wider that window, the more you take home. One of my students, Javier, found a property in Phoenix, Arizona with rent at $3,000 a month and an average nightly rate in this area of over $400. His first month, he brought in almost $15,000 at 100% occupancy, which by the way, is almost impossible to do. And that's the filter doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And if the math doesn't work out inside that 10-day window, I usually walk away. Doesn't matter how good the property looks or how much I like the market, because the moment you sign a lease on a property where the rates can't cover the rent fast enough, you're spending the rest of that year trying to dig out. And a lease doesn't care whether you made a mistake. You're locked in for 12, 24, 36 months at a time either way. So that filter is the reason there isn't a single property in this portfolio that I'd take back. But knowing the rule is one piece. Knowing everything else it takes to go from 0 to 17 is a completely different story, because this portfolio didn't start with rules, systems, or capital. It started with me making every possible mistake that you can make. I maxed out my personal Navy Federal credit card to fund property number 1. I was active duty in the military, working 90 plus hours a week, making calls to landlords from my truck between shifts and getting told no over and over. I grew up in South Texas watching poverty take people out left and right, and the military was the only way I could see out of that. So when I found this business model, I wasn't looking for a side hustle. I was looking for a way to retire my wife and me for good. But I had no mentor, no blueprint, and nobody to call when things went wrong. I didn't even know that 0% interest business credit existed, and you probably don't either. So I was eating high interest on every dollar I put in, from the furniture to the rent to the setup costs, all on a personal card that was charging me every single month. And the whole time, there was over $100,000 in 0% interest business credit sitting there waiting for me. I just didn't know it yet. And the truth behind 0% interest business funding is that getting high amounts of it with a brand new LLC and no established banking relationship in place at all is way harder than it sounds. Most people either get denied or walk away with a fraction of what they actually could have got qualified for because they hit the wrong lenders in the wrong order and they didn't have the relationships or anything of proof to back on why the bank should give them that much money. That's one of the things that my team handles for all of our clients now, connecting them with the right specialists who know exactly how to position the applications so they walk away with the maximum funding they qualify from day one. Because usually, no matter how good someone's personal credit is, without the relationships and without having an LLC making a ton of money, they might get $20,000. Like that's like absolute max, and that's like on the high end of things. And we could take that same person and get them $150,000 plus in 0% interest. Now, every month I stayed on that personal card was income I was handing over to interest payments. That mistake alone cost me at least like a full year. And that's coming from someone who since invested over $500,000 in education and mentorship, because I know exactly what it costs to figure this out alone. But even with everything I did wrong, that first property still generated more than it cost to run. And the moment those first bookings notifications came through, sitting in my truck on a military base, I knew this was a real business model. But knowing the model and how it works and knowing how to turn it into a portfolio are two completely different things. And real quick, if you want my team to look at a specific situation, at your specific situation, and figure out which market, which property type, which funding path makes sense for where you are, and even have my team show you how to set up your LLC, acquire 0% interest funds for you, negotiate properties for you and secure them for you, then set up the properties for you and get them launched and live and cash flowing, and set up all the automations where you're not having to manage it yourself. If you're interested in having that done for you, I'll leave a link down below where you can book a call and we'll map the whole thing out together. Now, that first property didn't just give me income, it gave me an education in everything I'd gotten wrong. So I fixed the foundation, set up the LLC, opened the right accounts. My funding team got me access to 0% interest business credit that never touched my personal credit. And that one shift from personal credit cards to real business funding changed the entire math of this situation, because instead of waiting months to save up while paying interest the whole time, I could have moved the second a good deal showed up. I was using business credit to cover the furnishing and the first few months of rent while each new property ramped up. And here's where it starts to compound. If each property is generating $8,000 to $16,000 a month in revenue, it doesn't take long before the portfolio is funding the next property all on its own. The business starts feeding itself, and each new property doesn't just add revenue, it adds leverage, because landlords who've already worked with you want to give you the next one too. So once property 2 is generating income, the revenue from 1 and 2 funded number 3, 3 funded 4, 5 and 6, and so on. And with each one, the process got faster because the systems carried over and the landlord relationships were already built. By property 5, the only thing slowing me down was finding the next deal. And the growth doesn't slow down as you scale. It speeds up actually. Like my client Daniel is the clearest proof of what it looks like when you start with the foundation already in place. He has a military background just like me, and my funding team set him up with $83,000 in 0% interest business credit. And he locked in his first property in 3 days later while he was in Australia, wasn't even in the States. He never had to step foot in that property. And that doesn't happen without the foundation. And Daniel started with the foundation already in place. The same foundation I had to learn the hard way over and over in my first year. But once I had it, the snowball moved fast. In just over 3 years, it took me from 1 property to 17, doing over $178,000 a month across a portfolio worth roughly $14 million. But the portfolio you're looking at today doesn't work the same way it did a year ago or even before that. Because right now, not a single one of those properties is on Airbnb. And I know that sounds counterintuitive coming from someone who built the whole thing on the platform, but what happened was simple. I had a team of subcontractors working on a nearby microchip plant, and they needed a place to stay. They actually booked a 1-night stay at one of my properties. They literally walked in and opened the door, they looked in it, and they just checked it out, right? And then they came back the next day and they booked the property for an entire month. And while they were there, they then asked me if I could do a long-term stay. I was thinking a couple months, but they asked me if I could do one for 3 years. And like I said, I was expecting 3 to 6 months. So when they said years, the whole calculation shifted. So I went to my landlord, renewed the lease, offered the crew a rate, I think it was like 15, 20% below what the property was earning on Airbnb, and signed a 3-year deal at full occupancy. That meant guaranteed income every single month for 3 years with none of the nightly turnover or seasonal risk I had been managing on the platform. Then, because they were staying 100% of the time, because most of the time our occupancy is about 80 to 90%, I actually ended up making more because they were staying full time and I wasn't having to pay any of the fees like Airbnb charges. Then those crews started referring other subcontractor teams to me. One referral led to another, and before I knew it, I was filling all my other properties the same exact exact way. Then I connected with an agency placing traveling healthcare workers and filled the remaining units through all of them. And that's how all 17 properties went from Airbnb to private contracts with multi-year terms and full occupancy, and the revenue pretty much stayed the same. But I don't deal with reviews, algorithm changes, or cancellations anymore. Now I have corporate housing agencies and subcontractors on 3, 4, multiple year commitments, paying rent on time every single month. And the stability is something the platform was never going to give me, because on Airbnb, you're always renting someone else's audience, and that audience can shift anytime they change the rules. Now, although I'm generating $178,000 every month, not all of it is mine. Between rent on 17 leases, cleaning, utilities, insurance, platform fees, it takes $74,000 to keep this portfolio running. But after all of that, I'm still keeping more than $103,000 in profit just last month. And that number has been consistent because every property in this portfolio went through the same 10-day filter before I ever put my name on the lease. A lot of people in this space show you the revenue and stop there, but I'd rather show you everything so you know exactly what this business looks like when nobody's cherry picking the numbers. And that's exactly why getting the numbers right from the start matters more than anything else, because people always ask me, what happens if the property doesn't get any bookings? Am I just screwed? No. Make sure that you know how to run the numbers and how to do the right research and analysis prior to, so you never end up with a property that's not going to get bookings. It would be really dumb of me to have a program about this, make videos about this, mentor people about this, if I was just hoping that properties would get bookings. No, I'm not hoping. I have a proven system and I know exactly how the properties will perform. Now, every property in this portfolio that I have now started with 3 decisions: which market, which property type, and how to fund it. And every one of those changes depending on your credit, your capital, and where you're starting from. The path that worked for a military guy in Scottsdale with strong credit isn't the same path that works for someone in a different city with a different financial profile. And getting those wrong is how people end up locked into a lease on a property that was never going to generate income in the first place. I've watched it happen, and every single time it's because they went in without someone who's already done it before, showing them where the real numbers are. So if you're serious about building this, I'll leave a link down below where you can book an application call with me and my team. We'll look at your specific numbers, figure out which model fits for you, which markets make sense for your budget, and exactly what it takes to get your first property signed, set up, and generating consistent income as soon as possible. So apply down below, and I'll see you on the other side.